Morning, Randy. How are you?
Good. Spring is coming. I just know it is.
I hope
It's
so.
gonna
I'm
it's
tired of
gonna be
being
here next
cold.
week. Yeah, really. So, we've talked the last few episodes about some technical things, articulation and tuners. Um, One of the things we haven't talked about is balance. Such an important concept when working with ensembles. And I know when you and I have done clinics together or separately, we're always talking about balance, right? Let's address that issue
Absolutely.
today.
Yeah. And to me, we can keep this pretty simple. Like, we try to keep everything fairly simple when we're talking about those things. I think it's best for kids too. But from a balance standpoint, I kind of approach it two ways. When you're doing your ensemble development exercises at the beginning of your band period, at that point, everyone's playing, right? And everyone's usually playing the same notes, or they might be playing a chord. That's where I think you really think about this first kind of balance, and that's simply ensemble balance from the bottom up. Now, I use a percentage chart, which some people think is crazy, but I swear to you it works. I did it just this last weekend with the Idaho All-State Band, and it really cleaned up their sound a bunch and it helped us get better clarity. And those percentages, now hang with me here for a second because this may sound a little like I'm off my rocker, and not that I haven't been, but I really think this works. If you start dividing up your groups into percentages, let's talk about bass instruments, tenor instruments, alto instruments, and soprano instruments, just like we talk about for an SATB choir, right? So your bass instruments are going to be what? They're going to be string bass if you have it. They're going to be tubas, of course. They're going to be bass clarinets and bari sax. So believe it or not, if we think about acoustics, they should create about 45% of your sound, which people think is absolutely crazy. Okay, but hang with me here for a second. Then, if we add our tenor instruments to that, that would be bassoon, tenor sax, trombone, euphonium. And some people will even add third clarinet or some other parts of that, or second horn or whatever. Maybe even second alto. It depends on how you want to look at it. But that would be about 30% of the sound. Now, immediately when I say that, my upper instrument people are freaking out because they're like, Salcedo, wait a minute, you're at 75% already and you haven't even mentioned my instrument. I'm like, exactly. So then we get to our alto instruments, which might be our horns or saxophones. And remember, people do this differently, guys. I'm just telling you a basic thought here. And those people would be 15%, and then everybody else is 10%. Well, right now, Randy Greenwald, who's a trumpet player, is probably looking at me with a poopy face because he's thinking, wait a minute, you mean I have to play soft the whole time? And that's not really what it's about. Okay, it's about playing in the proper balance. All right, so we're not necessarily saying that if you're only 10% of the sound, you're playing soft. Everyone can play full. All right, but we've all heard, Randy, groups that do it the other way around, where the upper instruments completely dominate. And if you look up, and my kids always say, they even did this last week in Idaho. They were like, I need you to explain this. Mr. Salcedo, I don't understand this acoustic things. And I said, if I actually took the time to explain the acoustics to you, your brain would start to ooze out of your ears. Okay, it would drive you nuts. But I just ask for that trust that based on acoustics, right, we have to have the bottom instruments dominating when the full band is playing. Now, the second aspect of tuning is, of course, the hierarchy of parts when you're working on a piece of music. What do you want us to hear? Then you start adjusting a little bit. But here's the thing I want to get across to everyone and make sure you understand, just because I'm dealing with this every weekend the same way that you guys are on a daily basis. When we say, here's a melody, and we don't want to cover up the melody, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't still think about the balance of everything else that's going on. And a lot of times people will have the melody be this far above the ensemble instead of just this far above the ensemble. And so that creates another balance problem. All right, so there's two ways to think about balance: what you do in your ensemble exercises, what you do when the full band is playing, all right, in a piece of music, and then what to do when you have little chamber sections or you're trying to bring out melodies, etc. All right, I'll give one more quick example, then I'll toss it back to you, Randy. And if your clarinets are being featured, we did a piece called Good Night, Dear Heart this last weekend. And it calls for a section where it's just clarinets and bass clarinets playing. And I would ask the students, who do we want to hear the most? And they would immediately say, because they knew how I was doing things, they'd say bass clarinets. Okay, and the first clarinets are giving me the poopy face. All right, so I'd say, who's next? Thirds. Who's next? Seconds. Who's last? First. Now they're really giving me the poopy face in the first clarinet section. But I'm saying it's not about the volume, it's about the balance. And I would have them reverse it. I'd say, first, I want you to dominate. Then we go back and say, okay, this time let's let the bass clarinets dominate. I'd say, band, raise your hand, which one you like the best. By far, everyone liked the one where the bass clarinets and the lower parts were dominating. So think about those things. Take the time with even the little chamber sections in your music to make sure that you're really thinking about balance. Man, Randy, I just talked a lot. I'm sorry, but you can tell I'm passionate about it. And, I listened to the recordings of this band I did this last weekend, and I was really proud of it. And part of the reason I was so proud is because their sound was pretty consistent all the way through, because they were really trying to stick to those balance percentages.
Yeah, that's terrific information. And I just, for our listeners, I use the same concepts, the percentages. There's a lot of different ways to do it, but the ultimate thing is we're talking about the quality of the sound, the warmth of the sound, the color of the sound. And with that being said, as Richard pointed out, you might have to apply that concept to just the clarinet choir, or
Yep.
just the woodwinds, or just the brass. And the last thing I'll leave you with is, I don't often mention volume. I mention degree of resonance, because
I like it. Like it.
it just, it's that idea of creating sound around you and how that projects out to the audience. And it's just a different way to think about it, so that the kids aren't thinking about one thing, which is so much, physically energized and driven that way, instead of driven with the ears and the listening and the skill set.
Yep. Agree completely. That's awesome.
And you can learn all these things at the Marching Arts Institute. There's our plug for this morning.
Yep.
June 15th through the 17th, we're going to have a great marching arts staff there. There's an opportunity to register here in the link. And if you have an opportunity to take advantage of that, whether it be virtually or in person at Bethel University, June 15th through the 17th, please do so. We're going to put all of these things that we've been talking about over the winter months to practice in the marching arts activity. Thanks so much for listening. And Richard, we'll see you next week on Coffee Talk.
All right. Thanks, Randy. Take care, everyone.